Hi, I've been getting quite a few questions asking me about my tyres that I run on my Iveco Daily 4x4 and also what pressures I run. So I thought I'd do a very short video basically explaining something about the tyre and also about the pressures I run. So here goes. So this is Cuthbert. Basically it's an Iveco Daily 4x4, so Euro 5 version, and I run on the original Michelin XZL 255-100 R16 tyres. They're primarily designed for off-road use. Extremely strong tyre. They're quite heavy. They're 39.9 kilos, just the rubber, without it actually being on a wheel. Load speed ratings on this. What's slightly unusual with this tyre, it has a 126k load speed rating, which means you can use it on an axle up to 3,400 kilos at 110 kilometers per hour. But my rear axle is rated at 3,700 kilos, so quite unusual for a tyre. It has a second low speed rating of 134J, which means you can go up to 4,240 kilo axle weight at 100 kilometers an hour. And this is the reason why the Iveco Daily 4x4, when it's supplied with these tyres, has a 100 kilometer an hour speed limiter. Make sure you don't exceed that limit. Another nice feature with these tyres is they can be run with tubes or tubeless. The Iveco Daily comes with split rims. I've done another video on how to change the tyres on the split rims. It's super easy, and they're also airtight split rims. So the nice feature with them is you have like an O-ring, and if you have that, you can run the tyres tubeless. But if you have tyre damage which you can't quickly repair with a patch and you just want to throw an inner tube in, you can take the O-ring out, put the inner tube in, and you're up and running again very quickly. Another good feature is the fact that the tyres are regroovable. So once you've gone all the way down through your 16.5 millimeters of tread, you do have the option to regroove the tyres, and that will give you an extra 5 to 10,000 kilometers. This is one of the tyres I have regrooved, and that should give me an extra 5 to 10,000 kilometers. You can go to a maximum regrooving depth of 3 millimeters on these tyres. They have a mud in snow rating. Some of the Germans I know don't rate them very highly in the snow. I personally haven't found them too much of an issue, but when you've got 5.5 to 6 tons going on the snow, you want to drive fairly carefully anyway, because momentum can get the better of you very quickly. Under the tread they've got 4 steel plies, and the sidewall is a steel ply as well, but is remarkably soft sidewall. It deflects very nicely when you run at low pressures, and they are designed to run at extremely low pressures, and I'll show that shortly when I deflate the tyres. Under the tread is a steel mesh which protects the tyres from nails, etc. They are designed to be used on construction sites as well as military applications, so it's a very useful feature to have. The photo in the top corner now, you can see there's a horseshoe that has actually gone in through the top of the tyre here, and it's come out the sidewall here. It took a pair of mole grips and a hammer for my friend to remove that from his tyre, and the tyre remained inflated, so it's a pretty tough beast. You see on the tyre markings there are 255-100. Now 255 is in theory the tread width, but you see when you measure it, it's actually a lot less than that. It's 210, and the reason for that is the 255 comes from the fact that it actually assumes this part of the profile is also part of your tread. And that's because when you run at low pressures, these nice smooth curves give you the extra grip in the sand. They're perfect in sand. There's no sharpness there. They're nice and smooth. They don't dig themselves in, and so you glide over the top of the sand really nicely when you're running at the low pressures. Okay, this is my front tyre at road pressure, which is about 42 psi. I've got the front axle at about 2,200 kilos, and I've used these barbecue skewers basically just to move into the back in the front of the tyre, just so I can get an idea of how long the footprint of the tyre is at present. So measuring that, that's giving me about 34 centimeters, and interestingly it means the rim is sat at about 24 centimeters off the ground. This is the rear tyre now. This is at about 70 psi, and it's loaded to about 3,600 kilos, and you can see that my footprint again, I've got around the 35 centimeter mark, and the rim height is again approximately 24-25 centimeters. Now the reason I quite like having the tyre set up with a pressure like this is that this is what I consider to be the correct pressure. It means that my rims are at the same height off the ground. Now what that means is my rolling circumference, or my rolling radius for the wheel, is the same on the front and the back. That means that both of the wheels will be doing the same RPM at the same speed, and that means that my differentials, because it's permanent four-wheel drive, will not be working very hard at all, because effectively the front axle and the rear axles are going at the same speed, so the central differential will also be going at the same speed, and there won't be much differential work there. It also means that if I do use a diff lock, again I won't be winding up the transmission very much, because effectively all the wheels are going at the same speed. Okay, now that's the road tyre pressure, 43 psi. I'm now going to deflate the tyre down to what I would class as my rough road or track pressure, which for the front tyres will be 25 psi. And we'll watch how the tyre length increases while the air comes out, and then how wide the tyre becomes, which is basically not very. Okay, measuring the tread length now. We're up to 37 centimeters. Okay, so that's increased the size of our footprint. That's going to give us better traction, and it's also going to put less pressure on the soil, so we're not going to dig in as much. You can see there is a bit more of a bulge in the sidewall. On firm ground, that's not going to make any difference at all to us. We've still got the same width, but in sand, this is now going to be giving you some support and giving you a larger surface area in contact with the sand, which gives you more flotation. What we're going to do now is we're going to go down to the sand pressure, which for the front tyre is going to be in the region of 16 psi. Okay, we're now up to 39.5 to 40 centimeters. So again, there's a massive increase in the footprint on the ground, but the actual contact width-wise hasn't increased that much. We do have quite a large bulge now. If you're in rocky terrain, you'd want to be careful you're not going to spike the side of the tyre on a sharp rock. But mainly we've got an extension in length, but we haven't had much of an increase in width. In an emergency, you can go lower. I have run down to 10 psi, so let's have a look at what 10 psi looks like for really, really soft sand. Okay, this is now 10 psi. This is a real emergency pressure setting when you're on really soft sand. The time I've had to use this is actually in Chile, when you've got volcanic ash. The beaches there are made with volcanic ash. It's much lighter than sand. You get much less support, and it almost floats. So we'll put the markers in again, measure the tread length. Okay, we're now up to 46 centimeters in length. Okay, when you're running the tyres at these crazy low pressures, what you've got to be really careful of is breaking the bead between the tyre and the rim. If that pops, obviously the air comes out and you've got a flat tyre. You're okay down to about 10 psi if you're going in a straight line. If you're going to turn, you need to be very, very careful, and you certainly don't want to be using aggressive amounts of power, wheel spinning the wheel rim within the tyre, because that will help to unseat the bead and possibly lose the air. The other things you've got to bear in mind is when you get down to these pressures, you've got to reduce your maximum speeds. The tyre's rated for 100 kilometers an hour at maximum weight, 110 if you're going down to 3,400 kilos. Once you've let the tyres down to track pressure, the recommendation is a maximum speed of about 65 kilometers an hour, and when you get down to these pressures, you really don't want to be going above 20 kilometers an hour. This is very much an emergency situation to get you moving again, and once you get onto firmer sand or firmer terrain, you want to be pumping the tyre back up again. Okay, there's always the debate on the fat or the thin tyre. Personally, I like these thin tyres. It's what the military use. The reason the military use them is because it's good for all terrains. If you're just going to be playing around on a beach, then maybe you want to go for a fatter tyre if you can't be bothered to inflate your tyres or deflate. As you can see, with the highly deflated tyre, it hasn't really become that much wider than it was previously, but as we've shown with the barbecue skewers, the tread length has become a lot longer. So your footprint, the square footage that you're actually putting onto the terrain has increased a lot, which means you won't sink in as much. So then you come on to the conversation of what tyre pressures do you use for what. Well, if you're in wet, slushy mud and you want to cut through the mud and get into the good terrain underneath, I keep normal road pressure. You could actually increase the pressure slightly. That way the skinny tyre pushes its way through the loose mud and you get onto the firmer mud underneath. If you're in that intermediate mud where it's kind of, maybe you won't push all the way through to the bottom, you can actually deflate to normal track pressures. That gives you a bit more flotation. You're not putting so much pressure on the soil. Your footprint's slightly longer, so you're getting more of these knobbles to grip onto the ground, and that helps to propel you through. That certainly worked for me going through the Amazon jungle. I was towing a 12-ton truck at some points, and these tyres performed excellently. If you're going for sand, again, the intermediate pressure. I generally have a rule that if I'm finding I'm having to drop into low range in the sand, it generally means my tyre pressure isn't low enough. Anybody can put loads and loads of power into a vehicle and try and grunt through deep sand, but actually all you're doing is you're putting more strain on your transmission, and you're obviously using your fuel, which might be important if you're going to a rough area. The worst I've done is in Brazil. We had some very soft sand, some extremely deep water. We were going through water in excess of 1 metre deep, and in fact we had a bow wave 1.5 metres halfway up our bonnet, which is quite a long way up if you consider how tall I am. I'm 1.74 m. We had water up to here. Not a great experience. When we were running at low pressure, we were also having to use low range, and we actually managed to consume 48 litres of fuel to go 100 kilometres. Normally I run around, I'm using somewhere between 14 and 16 litres per 100 kilometres. So using low range will eat your fuel. So an advantage of the skinny tyre, generally they're more fuel efficient because at the higher pressures when you're on the road there's a smaller contact area, therefore it's less drag, therefore you're using less fuel. When you do deflate the tyre to go through soft materials like sands, as you can see here, the frontal area hasn't actually increased that much, so you're not having more drag to push the tyre and the vehicle through the sand. However, you have significantly increased the length of the tyre. This is the advantage of having a 100% profile. You can deflate the tyre more to get more useful tread length without the disadvantage of having a fatter tyre, which is going to take more power out of your vehicle to propel it forward. Well, that's it really. I hope you found that useful. I'm not a tyre guy by profession or anything like that. I'm just an overlander driving around the world in my truck. Done 46 countries now. Over the last 5 years, 170,000 kilometres. Literally driven over all terrains, beaches, sand dunes in deserts, rock deserts in Namibia, over 50 degrees centigrade. In the Andes I've been over 5,000 meters, driving up volcanoes, 30-45 degree slopes on volcanic ash, which is covered in snow. In steep gradients, the truck does it all, has no problem at all at altitude, no problem at all with South American fuel. Really good vehicle, really good tyre combination. Hope you found it useful. I'm not sponsored in any way either. I've had good service from Michelin. They've managed to get tyres to me in Chile, and they've managed to get tyres to me in Mexico, and also get them homologated for use in Mexico. So I have to say they have given me good service, but I've not had any discounts or anything like that for this video. It's just purely my experiences and great products. Thanks.